1. For 6.5 years, I've worked with an event firm that did LARP-based events. Mostly kids' birthdays and bachelorette parties. But also quite a few school theme weeks and shopping malls, which combined a small core group with a ton of freelance workers. My former boss was toxic as all hell, with blatant favoritism, sexism, and plenty of verbal abuse. He would threaten people with firing them in public whilst shouting at them. And probably worst of all, would expect people to make whatever sacrifice in their home life to work for him. For example, he'd give people the day off, then call them in and yell at them when they didn't just drop whatever they were doing, whatever plans they had, and just get to work. He would often hang people out in group threats. One case where someone had been called into work, and after an hour been told, "We don't need you today anyway," and sent them home. 3 days in a row. So he asked in a group chat whether this was going to happen on the 4th day, since with the transport costs he was losing money to work for 1 hour. And my boss went on a long tirade in the chat about how said employee was lazy, didn't want to do his job, etc., etc. And when he showed up, he started yelling and screaming at him in person. Mind you, the boss is a grown-ass man. Early 40s, the employee was 16 at the time. But the cherry on top, one of his, in my opinion, worst things ever done, was at a festival in 2019. There was a minor issue. One of the others in the crew, roughly 25 people in total, didn't want to share a tent and threw a hissy fit. So our boss called me and yelled and shouted and ordered me to kick someone from the crew off the tent space we had, so this idiot could get his tent up, or to physically remove one of the families that were next to us. And if I didn't do it, he would have all of us kicked off the festival. So this festival is very important to the company. They deal out massive amounts of commercial material, and it's used to recruit roughly 40% of our crew. They often start out as youth workers, doing very minimal work, and slowly work their way up to grown-up job positions. So here comes the petty part. My friends and I make up about 15 out of the 25 people who were at the festival, with myself and 2 others being part of the core and the rest being freelancers. The next festival was supposed to be 2020, but Corona happened, so it wasn't until 2022 the festival came up again. The 2 others in the core had found other work, and I quit back in November. I could have just contacted the festival admins and asked for other work since I enjoyed the festival. But where's the petty in that? One of the freelancers and I did a bit of digging around and found somewhere that was needing as many people as we could get. So we made a few calls, had a few chats, and our former boss had formally stepped away from the festival this year because he had 1 person out of the 25 plus that is needed. And we are very much planning on seeing if we can take over for him next year. 2. In the Navy, some jobs are fun, some are less so. Some jobs it depends on context. Painting the side is one of those jobs. When you're under the pump and the crew are lazy, it's shit. But when you have a good team and it's a nice day and there's no rush, it can be almost fun. So after almost 2 years in a ship with a mediocre crew, we were preparing for a 3-month trip to Southeast Asia. With just over a week to go, the executive officer, XO, second in command, and my department head, who had only been on board 2 weeks, decided that I should be posted off and replaced, as I would be over the 2-year mark in the first few weeks of our trip. Most sea postings are 2 years in my branch. On the Monday before deployment, my replacement posted in. This was unusual. Usually your replacement came on after you posted off, and proceeded to learn his way around while I worked as normal and took my gear home 1 backpack full at a time over the course of a week. Friday rolls around. My post-out paperwork is as complete as it can be, and I am over the side on a pontoon with a few other guys painting. When I came back from lunch, I found out I was done. I thought nothing of it, as the other guys hadn't done much. There wasn't a lot left to do, and I had figured they were given other jobs. Less than an hour left in the workday. I'm almost finished, and I see most of my department in civilian clothes heading off. I asked someone from the other department that I saw where they were going, and the reply, "They got knocked off early and are going for a few beers." Time to get petty. Hand painting a ship is very simple. Standard-sized roller, 380 millimeters, and long extendable poles. A firm, even pressure and an up and down motion. This late in the day, the paint was starting to thicken. 2-pack paint with a 2 or 3 hour pot life. So I stopped using my up and down motion. I was right up the bow front end of the ship. So just under the pennant numbers, the ship's identification numbers, they're about 7 feet high on these ships, I proceed to start painting horizontally, with an overloaded roller and as much pressure as I can without bending the pole or the roller. A few curving motions, a finishing touch and two, and voila! A complete 12-feet-long cock, complete with balls. Being the same color as the rest of the ship, I didn't expect it to be visible after the paint dried. I could see it while it was wet, and that's all I cared about. I cleaned up and went home. Come Monday, as I walked into my new posting, I saw my old ship. The paint had dried, and overall she looked good. Just as I got to a certain angle, there it was. I felt proud that this ship would sail out that morning with my handiwork for all to see. I thought that was that. Fast forward 2 years. I post into a new crew on a different ship. Most of this ship's company had transferred across from my old ship a few months before. The only one from the old crew that had been there longer than a year was the guy who replaced me. Talking while we worked, the discussion of the old XO came up. The one who sent me ashore. He had only been off a few months at this stage and was not beloved of the department. Apparently, he had been fuming about having a giant cock painted on his ship, and every chance he got he was sending people to paint over it to try and cover it up, but it still showed through. It didn't get removed until they went into the dry dock and sandblasted the hull back to bare steel. I just sat there and grinned quietly. So I didn't just get my petty act of rebellion, I made those bastards do extra work for the rest of their time in that ship. To this day, nobody knows it was me. 3. So this happened more than 14 years ago, but I don't remember exactly how long ago. It involves myself and a Canadian-American office supply chain store that almost rhymes with maple syrup. A little bit of backstory is necessary before we get to the meat, though. It's lengthy, so I hope you don't mind. Way back when, in the stone age of my IT career, I was hired as a floor associate for this office supply store. It wasn't the position I'd applied for, but that'll change later. I applied for a position as an in-store computer tech. It wasn't long before my aptitude for the internal workings of computers became apparent, and one day, the store manager asked me into the tech office to help deal with the massive backlog of computers, and for service that the actual tech, who only worked a few hours a week, couldn't handle. I went through these tickets in relatively short order, turning the machines around and cleaning the bench, so to speak. At this point, the store decided to make me the full-time tech. That was fine by me. That's what I wanted in the first place. Unfortunately, when you let computers languish as long as this store had, and never do any marketing, the business doesn't come in very fast. I'd already moved to have some aggressive in-store marketing done by floor associates, along with enforcing certain company policies that were lax before. And things started to slowly turn around. Not fast enough for the store, though, who cut my hours back to 3 days a week. I applied for and worked other jobs to make up the difference. Over the next several months, I gradually built the store's tech services up from being bottom of the barrel to one of the top-grossing stores in the region, edging out larger and more well-established stories. We had a reputation for fast and efficient service, along with saving the customer time and money by handling anything that didn't require the warranty department in store. This further increased our store profits, and it wasn't long before the district management took notice and gave recognition to me personally. Of course, all this effort comes at a cost, and it wasn't long before my day was full from beginning to end. I was still working the other part-time job which offered higher pay but fewer hours, so it balanced out to being equal to the store job on fewer days. So I couldn't add more days to my store schedule without sacrificing my weekend, something I was unwilling to do. I started working extra hours, usually clocking in a shift anywhere from 10 to 14 hours. Business continued to explode, and it wasn't long before I was working lunches at my workbench too. Throughout all this, the store never bothered to hire a second tech. I didn't mind, I got paid, and it averaged out to a full 5-day job, and it was pennies compared to the money I was directly making the store. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. After about 6 months of this, the department manager came to me and stated that they could no longer afford to pay me overtime, despite TechWorks sales being higher than the store had ever seen, and my pay still being less or equal to what they'd have to pay me to work full-time for them. They didn't even offer to put me back to full-time or raise my pay, just told me to clock out at my scheduled time. So I did. I clocked out and went home, right when I was scheduled. Computer on the bench, it got left until my work the next day. Ticket not updated. Maybe the notes are on my desk and I clocked out before entering them into the system. I was always gone by my scheduled time, not a minute later. I also stopped working on my lunch break. Work times on the bench went through the roof, and it wasn't long before management started getting complaints from floor associates, who had to deal with angry customers not having their computers within a respectable length of time. One even called head office to complain after their computer was sitting with no news for 2 weeks. It was only 3 weeks with a huge disaster later that they finally relented and said I could work as long as I wanted. It didn't last, and a few months later I transferred stores before quitting for greener fields entirely. I still drive by that store and wonder how well they're doing without me, and it's been 11 years. 4. Long ago I worked as a barista in a small coffee shop inside of a bookstore. We had a customer who had 2 of the brattiest kids. They were ages 9 and 7, absolute terrors. The moment we saw them come in, we all knew that it meant sections of the store would be destroyed. They'd throw books on the floor, tear tags off of displays, throw things at one another. It was awful. And their mother? She didn't care how they acted. She let them behave that way. She was one of those snooty coffee snob types. Our manager at one point even politely told her to keep her kids under control, to which she got an attitude and called the district manager, who was also a Karen, and took up for her. The customer came in, and immediately her kids were extremely disruptive, arguing, bickering, even throwing tea cans off a shelf at each other, acting like total goblins. Their mother didn't correct them, but yelled her order at me and asked for a brownie from the pastry case. I got the brownie out and she waved her credit card in front of me very close to my face. "Cut it in half!" She yelled angrily at me as her demons were kicking at one another. This, I referred to, her card, as she flung her card at me, and I picked it up, holding it to show her. "Yes, I said, cut it in half. Didn't you hear me? Cut it in half. Cut it in half." And I, deep down, secretly knew she meant the brownie, but I pulled out the scissors and cut her debit card in half, right down the middle. I handed it back to her. It wasn't unusual for us to have customers who would ask us to cut old debit cards and credit cards or members' cards in half that were expired. She looked at me very blankly, and suddenly she realized her card was cut in half. "What have you done?" "Ma'am, you asked me to cut your card in half, several times. That is what you requested. I did as you asked." "Now my card, you bitch!" She began screaming at me, and asked for the manager, who came and recognized her. The Karen called me every name in the book, and my manager says, "If you asked for your card cut in half like she said you did, then that's what she did. Customer satisfaction." The lady grabbed her kids and said, "We will never come back in here. I am calling your district manager." Then stormed off, never to return. Every employee, every regular customer with an earshot, all began clapping. Yes, I know, but it does sometimes happen. And the district manager, the old one, who was a Karen, also had quit just a month before, and the new one didn't care and said good riddance. 5. So I currently work in a petrol station. I came full circle when I left that job to try for something else and other reasons, but in the end it did not work out, and landed a job at another petrol station. This story is about the previous one I worked at, which is part of a supermarket during the winter. I arrive at work at 5:45 a.m. Just as I walk over the forecourt, and next thing, I'm like Bambi while I try not to fall on my ass. Whilst doing this alongside of our duty manager, I said to him, "Hey, can you request the gritters, who we just passed gritting the main store car park, to maybe give us some love over here too? This could be dangerous for cars coming and going, but in the meantime, I'll just warn cars to drive slow and be careful until the gritters come around." He said that's a good call and he'll do that. Well, of course he didn't, so here's what happened next. After a good hour of standing outside in the cold, warning cars to drive slow and careful, I had to come back inside from the cold to help my coworker hold the fort while she went to the bathroom. While it was quiet, I got on my phone to the duty manager to ask him why he had not sent critters, but of course, no one answers the phone. I then notice a customer making his way in while shouting, "You okay, mate?" I look out the window and see a man mounted on his motorcycle fueling up, giving a thumbs up. I thought, oh man, here we go. I asked the customer what happened, and he tells me how he rode his bike over the ice and came off his bike. Of course, this happened so fast, and I was distracted calling the manager that I didn't see the man fall. But I thought CCTV caught this. So the guy who came off his bike enters, and there I am apologizing profusely. "I just heard you come off your bike, are you okay? Just scraped my knee a little and my elbow really hurts. I'll be fine." "Are you sure? Look, just come into the back with me and I'll get first aid to check you over, and the coffee's on me." "Hey, relax. I'm not going to make a claim, all is fine." "Okay, I'm really sorry this happened to you, and it's part of my job to make sure you're okay." "I'm okay, and don't worry about the coffee." So the biker leaves, but bear in mind he wasn't really wearing biker protection gear. In the end, we found bags of salt in some storage, and we took it upon ourselves to grit the forecourt ourselves, considering this was not our job to do so. A week later, my boss calls me on my day off to tell me there's a statement form I needed to fill out when I come into work next. I straight up ask, "This is about the guy who came off his bike, isn't it?" She says, "Yeah, he's making a claim." I rolled my eyes and laughed and told my boss how the guy told me he wasn't going to claim, but of course I didn't blame him. I head into work the next day and write a full statement of what happened, what I saw. Well, I didn't see him, but footage showed he did indeed fall, and wrote the exact conversation we had and left it at that, and just got on with the day. I came home later that night. My boss calls me to ask a very important question regarding if this guy will get his claim or not, and the question was, "The morning the guy fell off his bike, did you notice where the ice was before he arrived?" I straight up said, "Yes, I noticed there was ice. I noticed it when I walked over it and almost slipped and fell myself." There was a pause when I asked, "Are you sure? You need to answer this honestly." And I said, "Of course I'm sure, and I'm being honest." Did my coworker lie and say no? And if I'm honest here, I don't really care if the biker gets his claim or not. I requested a gritter that morning and no one turned up. I even called DM to not ask but tell him we needed a gritter. And I know what happened isn't personally my fault, as I tried as far as my duties are to prevent accidents such as this happening. The boss cuts me off. "Your answer here is very important here. You're saying you did notice ice." Then I said, "I'm not going to lie to possibly prevent a guy to win some I hurt myself money, and that's my answer and I'm sticking with it. Good night." And I hung up. Don't know if that guy got his claim or not, but all this would have been prevented if someone did their job right. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 150. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And before you go, if you could please press the like button. That helps me more than I can possibly explain. Alrighty, now let's see. We have a couple of birthday shoutouts today. I know, they're a bit like buses. None for days, and then, two come along at once. But okay, let's see. Who are our birthday peoples today? And today's first birthday shoutout goes to Jason. And Jason is 40 years old today. You're still just a boy, Jason, still just a boy. And as you are a boy, you're allowed to stuff your face with cake and candy today. But as you're a big boy, you can possibly also have some beer or wine or whatever else you like too. Don't go crazy. Alright, go a little bit crazy. But after the week's up, you have to behave after that. Okay, and I think we have... Oh, yes, we do. And today's second birthday shout-out goes to Jenny. Now, this is an order. I want you to make sure you pamper yourself today, right? Don't let anyone ruin your day, and you make sure you give yourself lots and lots of treats. Now, before we go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to both of you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jason. Dear Jenny. Happy birthday to you. Okay, and before we go, I think we're going to have a question of the day. So let's see. Hellfreezer's question of the day. All right, we're going to skirt with controversy a little bit today. Soup, cup, or bowl? Personally, there are times when it's useful to have both, I think. Like a cuppa soup obviously would go in a cup. I've never tried doing it in a bowl. You probably could. I wouldn't judge you if you did. But, yeah, sometimes I just open a can, pour it in, and warm up in the microwave, that's kind of what I mostly use my microwave for. It doesn't really get a lot of use now that I think about it. Just that, and maybe occasionally heating up like canned vegetables, which I mostly do fresh these days, or frozen. But, yeah. So do you have a preference, soup in a bowl or soup in a cup, or, well, a mug, rather? Let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.